Hey, what's up my brothers and sisters? We're going to be talking about Ninja today, and if I think the recently revealed cards are worth playing at all. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to all the patrons that have been supporting me over on Patreon. It has allowed me to hire a bunch more writers to provide us with some really nice hero guides for the various flesh and blood heroes out there, and the main website should be getting more and more guides like these. Like this one was written by Alvaro, who has a very nice Spanish YouTube channel. I will put this link down in the description somewhere, but I'm basically hiring people now to cover all the heroes that I can't cover myself, or that I don't have time to cover properly, to give us a main board, sideboard, and like a tips and tricks guide in general. We also have this really amazing guide by Katsu, which again is another content creator on YouTube, the Kugane Tom. Some of you might know him already. He does some really good narratively driven flesh and blood lore and history videos, but look at this absolutely massive article going into the ins and outs of every single matchup and stuff like that. So if you're a patron, I would definitely check it out. Like this guide is absolutely amazing. The guide that Alvaro has provided is amazing as well. There are going to be more guides on the website soon for patrons. Mainly I'm going to be writing a Fi guide myself, because Fi is one of my main decks. There's going to be a no-fuse Lexi guide, a hybrid dash guide. I'm currently talking with somebody to cover Icelander as well. And what else is in the making? And we have a Bravo guide coming up by the former Swiss champion Pascal, who has sent me a really extensive guide with all the little matchups, like what to sideboard, why to sideboard, how to play against certain heroes. So keep an eye out for that, and thank you everyone for supporting this, because we can start helping a lot of new players out there as well. But anyways, in regards to the spoiler, so we got Head Leads the Tail and Be Like Water, as well as Mars of Many Faces, since I did my last Katsu video. To be honest, like the Mars of Many Faces, I don't think it's going to be seeing a lot of play, but I think Mars of Many Faces, let's make that a bit bigger. This is a really solid card if you're playing draft or sealed and you happen to be able to get one of these. For one, it can block one, like getting a one block item is just good in general anyway, but being able to fix your combo lines with that instant ability is just very good, especially since we usually have like one or two resources floating anyway with Katsu. So if you're up against something that is not an ice hero, which luckily we don't have an outside the sealed and draft, I think this is going to be a very solid piece. Is it possible to utilize this as a maybe like a budget masterpiece? I don't think it can be a budget masterpiece. I think the Mount of Pouncing Lynx is definitely just better, because you can fetch any card from the deck as long as there's 2 or less base power. So I don't think it's going to be replacing the Master of Pouncing Lynx, and I definitely don't think it's going to be replacing the Master of Momentum. But it's yet another mask in our ninja arsenal, and I really love the artwork on this one. I don't know, I really love all these masks that they keep bringing out. I'm probably going to start collecting masks in general. I already been doing that, but it's just a very thematic card. This one I already covered in a video a few days ago, so if you want to know more about that, go check out that video. And then we have Head Leads the Tail and Be Like Water. So what does Head Leads the Tail do? Head Leads the Tail says, when this attacks, name another card. Attack action cards with the name have +1 this combat chain. I feel the value you get out of this card is not great at a glance. You only have a 3 attack, it costs 1, which is not good value. Usually you're already at like a 5 attack if you need to pay 1 resource, but getting +1 in every card with a particular name can be kind of good. And I could see in a draft environment that you could very easily combo this card with something like the Mars of Many Faces to get like additional +1 interaction out of that. However, I think the main deck that Head Leads the Tail would want to go into is probably a deck like the Katsu Crouching Tiger lists, or like any deck that wants to play multiples of a certain card. Like in 5, for example, you do play multiple copies of Phoenix Flame, so this one could potentially get like its full 5 value out of it. But then I do think if you play this card, you kind of need to make sure that you can play at least 3 cards with the particular name that you name. Otherwise, this is not really going to be doing all that much. Like, you want to get as much without +1 value as you can. So I don't think it's really going to see play, because there's going to be too many situations where the +1 doesn't matter. But I guess in a way it could create some very interesting combo situations where, for example, you play this card, you pitch a blue, and then when this attacks, you simply name something like Command and Conquer, and then when you play Command and Conquer after this, suddenly you get this Ira situation where the Command and Conquer is coming in for 7, which can be really huge for the opponent, because 7 is hard to block, even if, especially if you cannot utilize defense reactions and stuff like that. So I could see that interaction being a thing, like playing this right before you play an Erase Phase or a Command and Conquer, just to make that on-hit effect even more valuable. Because keep in mind, in something like a Command and Conquer, that one attack is pretty much like a +3 value, right? So in that case, then this card suddenly becomes like a 6 value for 1, which could be very good. So I'm not sure if it's good enough to replace anything in the Katsu main deck, because the main deck space is quite tight, but I could see this being run in something like Fi. I could definitely see that. And would we run it in something like Ira? I'm not sure if we would run an Ira. I mean, something like a Command and Conquer coming in for 8 is of course very nice, but I'm not sure if that extra +1 on the Command and Conquer is really going to be doing all that much. I guess it could stop the opponent from utilizing equipment to stop your Command and Conquer from dealing damage, but I need to wait and see. I still think if this were a 4 attack at the lower left, this would be an absolute odd to include, no questions asked. But because it's a 3 attack, I'm not 100% sure if it's really that good in general. So then we also have this other card which says be like water. When this hits, you may pay 1, and if you do, choose Head Jab, Surge Strike or Twin Twister. This gains the chosen name. Yeah, I understand what they wanted to go with this, but I kind of feel, since we do need to pay the 1 here, that this should probably have been a 4 attack, because a 3 attack is just very easy to block. Like, people put 1 card in front of it, then you don't get your activation trigger, and then I wonder if it's worth it at all. So I think Be Like Water, like, yes, it forces a block, which can be kind of good, but I'm not seeing it. I think this is, again, a great card in Draft or Sealed, but I don't think Be Like Water is going to be seeing any play in general, especially with, again, this, the sideboard space and the main board space for Katsu being quite limited. So I think Be Like Water is probably going to be Draft Chef, but it's a very beautiful artwork card, which is something that I'm particularly happy about. And I guess you could run like 3 copies of Ancestral Empowerment to make sure that this one actually hits, and then with a Tunic trigger you could very easily pull off the rest of your Whelming Gustwave combo line, for example, without having to pay additional resources. Of course, assuming that the Surging Strike, not the Surging Strike, the Whelming Gustwave will actually hit, so you have resources to pay for the Mugenshi release. But I think it's fine, I think it's okay, but again, we have a 2 block tied into this, and 2 blocks are not that good in general, which is also a bit of a problem with Head Leads to Tail. Like, having a 2 block on a card, it's risky, especially if now that we're in a format where there's a relative high amount of Guardians and stuff like that. If you get stuck with too many 2 blocks in your hand, you're kind of in a bit of trouble as Ninja, and I think there's a bit of a theme here that good cards are no longer getting a 3 block tied into it. Like, if we look at something like Command and Conquer, there's a 3 block tied into it, but then if we look at something like Erase Phase, which is objectively kind of a good card, but then you have that 2 block on the card, which isn't great. It's not great, but oh well, it is what it is, and I guess having some 2-blocks in your deck isn't the worst. I mean, usually when you're trying to stop an on-hit effect from something like a Snatch, for example, you want to block 4 or 5 anyway, so having a 2-block isn't all that bad, but I'm just worried that against those really big Crush Effect Guardian decks that something like this may not be as useful, especially if this is a card that usually you don't need in your hand, and it's probably the card that you would want to be blocking with in the first place, so we need to wait and see. Other than that, we haven't really seen any other ninja cards yet. We did see some generic cards like the Peace of Mind. Next time you'll be dealt damage, this turn prevent 4 of that damage. It's neat, it does cost 2 though, which is a little bit awkward, but I guess Peace of Mind does combo nicely with something like an Oasis Respite, especially because this is an instant card, and being an instant means that you can very easily bypass stuff like Dominate, so I could see it having some play. Maybe the yellow one could see play as well, and then the Ponder token. I forgot what the Ponder token does exactly, but I believe at the end of the turn you crack it and you can draw a card, so a card like this does allow you to have a arsenal slot, which is rather nice and something worth considering, which well, Oasis Respite doesn't do that. The only benefit of Oasis Respite in that regard is that you can pretty much play it off a Fiendal Spring Tunic counter. This one you need to actually pitch something to be able to prevent that. But I like the Ponder token because it allows us to pretty much go all out with our hand during our turn and still being able to get an arsenal, because these triggers resolve before you go into the arsenal phase of the game. So let me know, what do you think about the new spoilers so far? I'm still thinking that we're mostly going to be playing into the Dishonor and Lord of Wind combo line with a little bit of support sprinkled in here and there, but with something like Head Leads to Tail, maybe the Crouching Tiger Katsu build is a little bit more viable than I thought it was in the first place, but I like that. I really like the fact that now we have 2 ways to build the same hero, so you could go one path or you could go another path, which allows people to have a little bit of deck building flexibility in terms of deciding what kind of a deck they want to build. It's something that we've already seen with heroes like Dash, where you can either go the control route or the hybrid path with Dash in general, which is something I really like because it creates a little bit of that mystery feeling that when you face your opponent and you need to side up but you're not sure what kind of a build they're running, I don't know how to explain. It makes things a bit more interesting it adds another layer of decision making. I guess that's where I want to go with it all. Anyway, that's all for me for today. If you're a patron again, keep an eye out. I'm going to be uploading more guides on the website very soon. I know the layout of the website isn't great and that it's a little bit of a buggy mess since I'm mostly doing everything by myself. But once we have enough guides on there, I'm going to see if I can maybe hire somebody to do a website for me that can do a little bit of a better job than I do, or maybe I can get another domain with a bit of a better layout to put all these articles onto, so let's just see how it goes. Anyway, everyone, thanks again for watching, and I will see you all next time with the next Flesh and Blood video.